Sir Alex Ferguson got on the stage and he gave one of the most inspirational speeches I've ever heard on the back of one of the biggest losses that he probably ever encountered as a manager right across his career. His speech was like Churchillian.
Welcome back to episode 12 of the Unstoppable podcast. I'm incredibly excited today because we've got a very special guest, and if you're a football fan, and in particular if you're a Manchester United fan, you'll most definitely know this man. So today I'm joined by Keegan.
Delighted to be here, Jonny. Thank you very much indeed. It took a while to get us sat down here, but here we are, ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, and I'm excited because we've already been chatting before this podcast, and I've learned a lot about Alan that I didn't actually know before this podcast. We actually met at a recent music festival.
Yeah, there's a brilliant music festival that's been going now for 4 years. It's in the Greater Manchester area. If people know Greater Manchester, it's in Stockport, which is on the south side of Manchester, which is called Crack by the Creek. It's normally the third week in July, and the boys who've been running it, Matt and Patrick and Donal, they put a lot of work into it, and I have the pleasure and the honour of hosting the event, you know, through my, I suppose, football connections, my Irish connections, and the fact that I do present and host a lot of shows, you know, so hopefully we'll dig down a bit deeper into that. And
yeah, and it was great. A lot of the listeners will know I play for an amateur football team, and you had shot a video for me in my football group chat on WhatsApp, and I had sent it in, and most of those boys support Manchester United, and it was announcing Jonny Pearce, the super sub. I'll overlay it over this video for people to see, but we all had a great laugh at that. And I suppose that brings me to my first point, you know, the Voice of Old Trafford since the year 2000. Talk us through it.
Yeah, well, it's not been an overnight journey, but it's been a great journey, you know, and again, coming from an Irish upbringing, Mum and Dad were from the west of Ireland. I've got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. Unfortunately, my older sister's no longer with us. They were all born in the west of Ireland. So my mum and dad came over to Manchester, and new house, new home, new baby. They had me. So I suppose when we're looking about where did it all start, it was definitely with that Irish upbringing, which I'm very proud of, you know, and it's been a fantastic journey as part of that, because when I look at certain things within the upbringing I had, my parents were a big influence. You know, first of all, my dad was a big United fan because he was from Ireland. Georgie Best, I suppose, had a massive influence on him, and that was the reason why I began supporting a team with a red shirt, you know. And then throughout my younger days, you know, I was involved in, if you like, the Irish entertainment scene in Manchester. You know, I DJ'd. I was involved in local radio through presenting an Irish radio show. So, you know, it's been a journey, and it's had different chapters which have been absolutely brilliant to sort of get me to that point where I became the announcer, the stadium announcer at Old Trafford, the voice of Old Trafford. So, yeah, it's in short, it's been different chapters, but very interesting ones along the way.
Yeah, and I think people, you know, see people like you, and we interview a lot of high performers on this podcast who have achieved great things across their career, and people don't see maybe the challenges in the lead up to that. So has there been any kind of standout challenges that maybe you've thought you would struggle to bounce back from?
Yeah, I think we all have our own personal challenges, and you set yourself a target. And I think, you know, I was very fortunate because in the latter end, if you like, of one of the final chapters career-wise, you know, I ended up teaching at the University of Central Lancashire in the north of England. I was head of media there for 20 years, but to get to that point when I was younger, and in particular starting off on my road, if you like, I started going into the property game, and unfortunately I went bankrupt, and that was probably one of, you know, apart from losing a family member through death, that was one of the biggest challenges that I had to face, because, you know, 1 minute you're okay, you're doing all right, you're in business, you've got a property, and the next day, you know, you're facing bankruptcy, and, you know, where's your next few quid coming in from? And it was a difficult journey, and a very challenging one. But, you know, I came through it. You know, I ended up doing a degree in media. I ended up teaching, and, you know, had a brilliant time teaching for 20 years in the world of media, and radio was always my background and the foundation, you know, so that led me to so many other things. So yeah, with the challenges came a lot of hard work, and with a lot of hard work, a lot of success, thankfully.
Yeah, 100%. And I think being able to bounce back from that is one of the biggest things. And most people could be crippled by something like that and they would give up on everything. But you actually used it as almost the motivation and the vehicle towards where you are today. And I suppose when we think about that journey, you started off on the other side of Manchester.
Yeah, well, again, you know, perhaps I should fit that into the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I ended up working at Manchester City, which was an unusual route to take, you know. But you know, when we're young, you're looking for openings, aren't you? You know, you want to see there's an opportunity there, and I used to say to the students, you know, everybody gets an opportunity, but do you see it? And that's the difference, you know. Sometimes, particularly young people are at the start of their career, they don't see the opportunity. You know, for an example, I sometimes talk with students perhaps who supported Everton or City or Liverpool, and I'd say to them, you know, if they were an Everton fan, hey, you know, Jonny, if you got the opportunity, would you go and work with Liverpool, or, you know, vice versa, whichever? Oh no, I wouldn't do that, you know. And I used to try and open up their mind, you know, because I had a slide that I used to present with, you know, you must see the opportunity. But with the word see, I used to put in brackets the letter K, because you have to see it, but you have to seek it as well. And that was one of the slides I showed to the students, and always I thought was a very powerful slide. And I thought it all up on myself, you know, I couldn't believe it, you know.
Class,
you know, yeah, but it was simple, but very effective in its message. So yeah, City was very much part of the early days, and I have to say, an absolutely brilliant time. You know, it's when they were in Division 2 at the lowest point, you know, far from where they are now, you know. And it was an interesting learning curve with City, you know, and it taught me everything I needed to know to move on to get to Old Trafford. So yeah, everything's a stepping stone in life, isn't it? And everything is always a learning curve. That's what I was always trying to say to the students. Learn from your mistakes, look at where you want to be, set yourself a target, and hopefully you can achieve it, you know.
Yeah, and you'd said earlier, you know, you kind of, and it maybe happened through a number of obviously different things that kind of happened in your career, but you were going to United games as a kid.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, going to to Old Trafford with family and friends, and as a very young person, you know. And then as I got older, and before I ever had kids, I'm very fortunate, because I married a woman who likes football, and we ended up getting a couple of season tickets in the Stretford End, and you know, 34 years later we still have them. And she would come along, my wife would come along with me to Old Trafford. We're right in the middle of the Stretford End, behind the goals, you know, halfway up. And I used to look down at my predecessor and think, you know, I'd absolutely love that job. I'd love the chance to be the stadium announcer. And, you know, 10 years later, I ended up getting the job.
Yeah, and was it a case of you met someone, or is it a job application comes up and you throw your CV in? Because I can't imagine it being like that.
No, you're right, Jonny. It isn't like that. And that's why, going back to the point of seeing the opportunity or seeking it, I worked at City. City asked me to do some of their warm-up, because I was involved with what they call the Junior Blues, where they were encouraging, they had a meeting once a month, and they used to bring the players. And it was a great learning curve for me, because I was interviewing first team players, albeit with City, and I was always professional, you know. I had the opportunity to work for them, although I supported United. And one thing led to another, where, you know, if you hold that moment, I also went to Old Trafford with a friend of mine who had corporate seats, and they had a host in the room. We've all been in it before. There was 300 people in the room, and they had a host. And the first time I went, they had a guy who was from Liverpool hosting the room. And I'm saying to my friend, how come they've got a Liverpool guy hosting the room? You know, there's 300 people, 90% of them United fans. And anyway, didn't think much of it. And then about 4 weeks later, he asked me again. One of his clients had dropped out. It's one of these where, you know, you go with people who've got United tickets to do the corporate bit, a three-course meal, and everyone loves a freebie, don't they? So I went the second time, and they had another guy hosting, who was, I don't know if you remember, he used to play for Everton and Leeds, and I'm thinking, they've got Duncan McKenzie hosting the room. He used to play for Everton, Leeds. What's going on? Anyway, I saw the opportunity, and and I wrote to the commercial manager, Danny McGregor, and said, listen, I think I can bring something to the match day experience. Can I meet you? I've got an idea. Anyway, never heard anything. Sent me letter and never heard a word. And I just said to my wife a week or two later, I'm going to ring United. I'm going to ring Danny McGregor. And like Julie said, you'll never get through to him. You know, he's not going to speak to you, is he? But one of the lessons I also learned, and I said this to the students and anybody, you've always got to get in with the PA.
Yeah.
Because that's your first call, and they're the ones, if they're going to let you through, they'll let you through. But if they're a good PA, they won't let you through. Yeah. So when I sent the letter, I sent it for her attention, you know, as well as Danny McGregor, who was the guy I wrote to, the commercial manager. Anyway, I rang United, and the receptionist said, who is it? And I said, oh, it's Alan Keegan from Manchester City. I thought if I said it's Alan Keegan from wherever, they're not going to take any notice. So anyway, it was at that moment, Jonny, you know, when they put you on hold and the music's ringing, I'm thinking, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
You know, anyway, I was waiting, and which seemed like an eternity. Anyway, this beautiful Alison, she was called, and we're dead good friends now.
Yeah.
But this beautiful Scottish accent came on the end of the phone. I didn't know her.
Yeah.
And she went, hello, Alan. She said, I've been meaning to phone you.
No way.
Danny wants to meet you. He's intrigued by you can enhance the match day experience, because I'd put it on in my letter. And she said, are you free to meet him on Friday? Well, obviously I was going to be free. So I went in to meet Danny, and he had this office, and I vowed I'd have an office one day like it. I went in, and he sat here chatting with me, and all the way around on the walls he had pictures of Brian Robson, Steve Bruce, and lifting champion leagues, and all signed memorabilia. And I sat there looking at it, and I was you know, amazed by it all. And I thought, one day I will have an office like that, and I've got it now. But anyway, he said to me, let's talk through blah blah blah, you know, this match day experience. And what it was, as you know, when you're in a corporate thing at a game, you might have 10 people sat at a table, and there might be, you know, 6 or 8 United fans, and they might have brought a guest to support the away team. So I put a quiz together, and I aimed it at the next game they were playing. I did 20 questions, 15 United, and then 5 were aimed at the other team, which happened to be Wimbledon. So that's how long ago it was. And he looked at it, and I said, what we do, Danny, before the game, and they're normally there 3 hours before the guest. I said, you put one on each table, and it's, you know, starts up a conversation and blah blah blah, because I'd been there, hadn't I, in this room, so I knew. And anyway, he looked at it, and he said, what's it going to cost me? I said, all it'll cost you is a bottle of wine at the end, because I said, I'll do the quiz, we'll lay it out on each of the 30 tables, they'll do it before they go and watch the match. When they're watching the match, I or the hostesses will mark it, and then when they come back after the game, because they normally have an hour, we'll go through the answers. So he's going, Alison, come in here, this is a great idea. He was a proper Mancunian, you know.
Yeah.
This is a great idea. Why has no one thought of this? It's brilliant. So he said to me, I'll tell you what I'll do. This was around the March time. He said, I'll get you to come in the first 2 games of next season. You can host the room. Because I was telling him, I said, well, how come you had a Liverpool presenter, and you had a guy who used to play for Everton and Leeds, you know? I said, hosting the room. He said, get a good old Mancunian like me doing it. And he said, I'll give you 2 matches at the beginning of next season. So I said, right, okay, no problem. That's about March, because it is about the journey, isn't it? And it's about, you know, I don't normally go into this detail because,
but it's so interesting, because it takes confidence to say to yourself, I'm going to phone this person, because so many people, like you've said, and a lot of this podcast is about so far taking opportunities and being able to actually look for the opportunity and actually commit to following through. And that's exactly what you do. And you did in that scenario. And obviously having the confidence to do that,
Yeah.
How did that confidence come about? And obviously you've got, this is kind of an important point, where you've got this distinctive voice, and any Manchester United fan listening to this doesn't need to watch the YouTube clip. They can listen on Spotify and they say, that's Alan Keegan. But do you think that was a learned skill or something you were born with?
Well, there's a lot in there that you've just said.
Yeah.
So about the opportunity, don't forget, you see, I've come off the back of a bankruptcy. So I'm looking and I'm hungry. And when you're hungry, you will look around you and you've got to see, is there an opportunity out there that I can grab? So I've come off the back of the bankruptcy. I'm looking at the next stage. I'm doing a bit of work at City. I've seen this opportunity at Man United in the corporate suite. And then I've written to the guys. So it's taking that step. And as you say, I'll come back to the voice in a minute. Because obviously when I'm speaking with him, with this Danny McGregor, he's a commercial manager. He sees something, doesn't he? You know, you sit across from someone or you're looking at someone and you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to give this guy a break. I'm going to give him a chance. We've all done it in our own little ways, haven't we? You know, people coming through the system or whatever. And I suppose with Danny, I think he must have saw that hunger and he must have seen that commitment. So what he said, I'll give you the 2 games. But what happened, which was a massive turning point, that was in the March of 2000. So he told me, I'm going to give you the 2 games in August, right? So that's fine. So in April, I get a call off Alison, the lovely Scottish lady again, and says to me, listen, Danny's been in touch. He wants to know, are you free this Saturday to host the suite? Wilf and the guys who normally do it aren't available. They can't do it. Well, obviously I would have been available because I'd have been sitting in the Stretford end. So I said, yeah, no problem. I'll do it. What time do you want me there? Well, the guests start coming in. It was the good old 3 o'clock kickoff. So the guests come in at 12. So we need you there for, 11, half past, get a feel for the room. You'll be working with Stuart. So I said, okay, fine. And do your thing. So I thought, right. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, do you want me to bring me quiz? And we'll try it out. She said, oh, that'd be brilliant. So I brought this quiz with the 20 questions on an A4, printed them all out, and laid it all out. I was there dead early. It's the only job I've ever taken that I never asked, how much am I getting?
Yeah.
It was irrelevant, So I went and did the quiz. And what I also did on that particular day, and not so much, I suppose it was my experience of earlier days of DJing in the Manchester sort of Irish circuit. I walked the room with the mic and I spoke to people at the table, and if there was a young lad there, say your son was with you, I'd have a chat with him and who you're here with, and I broke the ice. And later on, we did the quiz. It went down really well, the quiz. We had the prize was a bottle of wine for the table at the end, so they could share a glass of wine or whatever. It wasn't massive. Yeah. But I'll tell you what they had. They had some little gifts, where you get a scarf or a little key ring or something. Yeah. And I said to the organisers, there was about 10 hostesses looking after the room, And I said, there was a box of giveaways. And I said, do you mind if I use them for something at the end? And I'd looked round the room and I'd counted roughly that there must have been about 10 kids who were under 11, So I just went, they said, yeah, carry on, And I just said at the end, I said, is there anybody here who's 11 or under? If you are, come up to the side of the stage, This is after the game, we'd won the game. And when they came up, I had a little chat with the kid. Now, yourself, if they're happy, if they, the parents are happy, aren't they?
100%.
So everybody, and what I did, all these gifts, there might have been a scarf or something, I gave it each of the kids. So they were off with a big smile on their face, and they're Man United fans for the rest of their life, They remember that day at Old Trafford. Anyway, to fast forward, and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry, Ryan, I really am sorry.
This is perfect.
What I did, I gave it them all. Now, if I'm honest with you, right, I knew it went well. I'd planned what I was going to do. It was one of those where I was confident. I knew about United. I ended up working with Stuart, who was Stuart Pearson, right? The ex-United legend. So, and I loved Pancho. You know, I knew his nickname. I could talk the talk. I knew what I was doing about United, because you do a Q&A with a legend beforehand. You've seen it all. But I never heard a word. Never heard a word after I'd done it, the following week. Not, you were great, you were bad, thanks very much. I got paid, obviously. Never heard a thing, so I thought, all right, that was, I thought I'd had a bit of feedback, Anyway, so we roll forward, that's April, roll forward. The week before the football season's going to start, I get a call off Alison again. Hi Alan, can you come in next week? We're having a bit of lunch for all the hosts. And because you can imagine at United, they have about 10 hosts at every game. Yeah. Can you come in for a bit of a meeting with Danny? Now, don't forget, I've not spoke to them since I've done the event. I've not spoke to him since he not interviewed me, but we had a conversation. So I turn up at this particular meeting and I'm in a box. Now, don't forget, I've never been that side of United before. I've just sat in the stadium or stood in the stadium as a young lad. The pitch is like a snooker table. It looks absolutely fantastic. We all sit round this big table in a corporate room, like a box overlooking the pitch. And so Danny comes in and you've got like Norman Whitesides there, Wilf McGuinness, Stuart Pearson, other hosts who wouldn't be household names, they're all there as well. And Danny sits down and he was a proper northern Mancunian, and he goes, right, afternoon everybody, great to have you here. Blah, 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 goes for it. And he said, right, I want to introduce Alan Keegan. He said, he's our new host on a match day. And he said, he's going to be hosting all the games in the Manchester suite. He never even said, can you do it? Because remember, he said, I'll give you the first 2 games.
Yeah.
He's telling all these, he's doing all the games in the Manchester suite.
Right.
So I'm thinking, that's 19 games in the Premier League, plus 3 Champions League games, and then maybe I could end up doing 25 games and getting paid to watch the team I love. So that was the turning point in my life.
So he hadn't told you before?
He hadn't told me. No one had discussed it with me, just said he's doing it, But obviously he read it. He knew I'd be at the game anyway because I was a season ticket holder. And that was a turning point in my life, Jonny. When you get a moment where it's a sliding door or something happens where we all say, what was that turning point? What changed your life? So that changed my life. My life was never the same after that.
Unreal. Yeah. And such a good story and such fond memories. And I'm sure you're incredibly grateful for the break that you were given by...
I mean, God rest him, he's in heaven now, Danny. He's no longer with us. But what happened as a result of that, just to fast forward, and what happened then, I did the suite for 2 years. Right, I made it my own, And I think anybody watching the podcast will understand, but the suite is like, there's 300 people, it's corporate, it's before the game, they go in, they have a 3-course meal, they've got a host like me, they've got a legend who'll come in, it could be Norman Whiteside or any of the other guys like that. You do a Q&A, you just host it, they all go out and watch the game, I get to watch the game, you come back in at half time, get a cup of tea and blah, 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 maybe a quick overview with the legend, how's it going, and at the end, you wrap it up, But here's where another turning point came. So Danny McGregor recommended me to the club secretary to be the announcer at Manchester United because my predecessor, his contract with United was ending and they were looking for a new announcer. And Danny McGregor said in a meeting at Old Trafford with, exec, like the board and execs, it come on the agenda, we're looking for a new stadium announcer. And Danny McGregor said, well, the lad who does City is a United fan and he works for us on a match day in the exec suites. He's been doing it for 2 years. Why don't you give him a call and bring him in? And so to come back to the voice, that was very important to United, that it was a Manchester accent. Yeah. Very, very important. And with the rest of the CV that I had, I'd done stadium announcing, albeit at City. I was doing the job, wasn't it? But like somebody who played the bass guitar for Nathan Carter. Yeah. He might have played it the week before for, Johnny Brady. Yeah. But it's
experience.
I had the skill set, and So I had 2 interviews for the job with one with the assistant club secretary Ken Ramsden, and then the second interview with Ken Ramsden and Ken Merritt, who were the secretary and the assistant secretary. And in August of 2000, I did my very first game, which was Dennis Irwin's testimonial. I'd had to leave City, obviously as part of the agreement, which obviously United were my club.
Yeah.
And my first Premier League game was Newcastle United. My first goals were Andrew Cole and Ronnie Johnson.
Unreal. And you still remember them to this day?
Oh, one of the most exciting announcements I've ever done. You know, to be in the club that I love. 75,000 people. You can imagine the hair on the back of your neck. Wouldn't be on my head, would it?
But how did you feel before, the night before this first game?
Well, what had happened the Wednesday before, Dennis Irwin had his testimonial against City, funnily enough, and I'd just come from City. So that was a bit surreal, but, you know, I don't remember much about that because I was very nervous and, you know, you're going through all this sort of, you know, I'd done it at City for a couple of years and I didn't want to change my style because when they called me in, they asked me what I did and how I did it and the format and the process. So, you know, I can only be me, and I've always said that again to students, always be yourself, because ultimately that's who you are. And if you try and be something else or somebody else, it won't work because somewhere along the line it'll drop. Whereas if you're just you, be you, and you can always stand by it. So I was just me. And, you know, to be honest, it probably took me the first season to get into it because, you know, you're going from a Premier League game, you're going to an FA Cup game, you're going to a League Cup game, and then you're doing Champions League, which is totally different.
Yeah, and obviously there's a sense of pressure comes with that, and a lot of people listening to this podcast will work in a career or have a business that puts them under pressure from time to time. How do you cope with pressure?
That's an interesting one because, as I briefly alluded to, you know, within this journey, I've been a university lecturer, and you know, you're teaching students, you're giving them a talk, and I always maintain right across the board with anything, whether it's United, whether it's hosting an event, and whether it's sort of performing in any aspect of a corporate event, preparation. Preparation is fundamental because, you know, if you go in prepared and you've got all your facts, all your information, you've got it there in front of you, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on a piece of a cue card or anything like that, you go in and if you're nervous, which I was for the first few games, a nervous excitement, but the one thing that stood by me, Jonny, I was prepared. And if you're prepared, it's like the saying goes, you know, fail to prepare, blah, blah, blah. You're in a good place. And that was fundamentally my starting point. Do your research, do your preparation, and then you can back it up with your delivery.
And what does preparation for a game look like now?
Very different from them early days. You know, the early days, there was a structure. We still have a running order. You know, what's going to happen when, like the announcements, the club, you know, you might be promoting ticket information back then. But now you with social media, Twitter, websites, Instagram, the whole lot, that information's already there. But sometimes, you know, particularly for the older fans, I was that source of income. You know, please refer to your programme on page 15. There's all your ticket information about the forthcoming games. Now it's instant, isn't it? So it has changed. Obviously, one of the things Ken Ramsden always said to me, the gentleman who interviewed me, he said to me, remember, you're an information service. You're not there to entertain. They're there to, the entertainers are the 11 players in the red shirt, plus those who come off the bench. You're there to inform. And I never forgot that. And even to this day, when I'm at Old Trafford, it's not about Alan Keegan. You know, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy who talks through the PA and tries to relay some information. So, you know, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that does. And it's interesting because, you know, obviously times have changed. Social media is now available and people get their updates instead of, you know, I'm sure program sales are down a fair bit since 2000, but equally it's so interesting to kind of hear how that's transition for you from the start to now? And I suppose people interested listening to this will think about an average work week for you. So obviously preparation's an element to that, and you've got a number of different things going on in the background. But you know, are you a 1 day a week man, or what is it looking like right now?
For looking towards a football game, you mean, or generally?
Just generally, like Alan Keegan's average work
Yeah,
week.
well, I'm very, very fortunate because I'm really busy. I worked at the university as a lecturer in media for 20 years, but I finished that just around lockdown. I'd had a brilliant run, and I loved it. The fact that I was going to say that I got the opportunity, a second bite of the apple, because again I come out of the bankruptcy. But what it made me do, I ended up doing a degree in media because I sat down and thought, well, what do I love? And you know, I used to say it to the students, and it's such a cliche, but find a job that you love and you never work a day in your life. So I worked at the University of Central Lancashire for 20 years. I loved every day of it. You know, yeah, there was challenges, there was difficult times, you know, whether it was, you know, colleagues, whether it was students, whether it was the course, whether it was different aspects. But I loved the job, you see. But then again, with United, you know, you've got the games, you might have different Champions League games, players' names, etc. You know, you've got to, out of respect, say the player's name right, you know, whether it's the away team or whether it's a new player joining us, you know. So there's all those bits, and obviously now I host and present a lot of events, you know. I'm all over the country doing, you know, an audience with different United legends and different other people, you know. It might be Harry Redknapp, it might be Joe Calzaghe, it might be, you know, different elements, Stuart Pearce. So from that point of view, again, but that old chestnut still comes into it, preparation. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't rock up to an event and just wing it. And I always with United, you know, there's different scripts that come with each match. So, you know, obviously the club will supply the scripts through the media office. I have to make sure, so they'll try and email that to me the day before, and I'll prepare again. I've got a folder, I should have showed it you actually. I've got a folder that's like with the plastic sleeves inside, but it's like got 40 sleeves. I see some of my other fellow stadium announcers, they use a clipboard. It wouldn't work for me, you know, because I've got so much stuff to go through. So you know, sort of things like that. And it's got a sleeve on it, so if it rains, it doesn't get wet. You've got to think about all these things, you know.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. And obviously, on the hosting point of view, you've had different opportunities presented to you off the back of what you do today and have done in the past. So, you know, I was doing some research. Obviously, the Olympics was one of them.
Yeah.
The computer game that me and my friend love.
Yeah.
Up until 2021. So
yeah, I mean, these are all the doors that open. I mean, I said to you before regarding you know, Danny McGregor's phone call being life changing. You know, because it was. And you know, if I just give you an example along those lines, I had the privilege of presenting and hosting at the 2012 Olympics. Obviously, the football side of it, what an honour, you know, to be involved in that. Yeah, it was unbelievable. But also with United, you know, I'm a working class, second generation Irish Mancunian, and I've been all over the world. You know, there's places I could only have dreamed of travelling to, you know, Japan, China, Russia, Hong Kong, you know, America numerous times. So, you know, all the finals that United have been in the European and the Champions League, I've announced at them, you know, whether it was Russia, Italy, Wembley, you know. And then out of that came, and this goes back to the Voice again, EA Sports contacted me, and that was a strange one because it was an email.
Right.
They sent me this email asking me, the guy introduced himself and said, I'm the producer of the FIFA game that's coming up in, I think it was 2016, 2017. This was around Christmas time. And he said, would you be interested in doing some recordings for us? But there was no letterheads on it or anything. It was like a very dry email. Yeah. But obviously his name was on it. So again, back to research and preparation, I Googled him. I put his name in Google and it lit up like a Christmas tree, and there he was, part of EA Sports, you know, this, that and the other, that was his role, and these were the projects he'd worked on. So I thought, well, I better take this email a bit serious. So I emailed back professionally saying, you know, hi Andrew, great to hear from you. Yeah, I'd be definitely interested in doing some recordings for you, you know, and then we went through different things. And even that was funny because at the time I didn't realise, but you may know it, but EA Sports, they're actually based in Canada. So we were talking through, and you know, I'm a member of equity. These are all things that come into it when you're agreeing a fee, because I didn't have an agent, and so you're agreeing a fee, and equity, well, like my agent, you know, with the fees, they have a set rate, you see. So they have a guide chart, and we came to an agreement, and then he said, would I go to London to record it? So basically what it involved me 4 days in a recording studio.
Right.
So I said, well, yeah, London's great, but we do have recording studios in the north of England, and I can recommend a couple, you know, because I do voiceovers. So anyway, he said, yeah, that's fine, because everybody outside of Britain or England think it all happens in London, you see. Anyway, I recommended 2 studios, and he went with one of them in the north of England, you know, so it was great.
So the FIFA game, what exactly did those 4 days entail?
Oh, it was a great experience, Jonny. Unbelievable, you know. Nearly lost my voice at the end of it. But the criteria was, they gave me a spreadsheet that was ream after ream after ream. It was unbelievable, the preparation. The only thing I can compare it with, and you'll appreciate with the graphics and how far they've come on, it was like making a movie. It was like making a movie, because you can imagine everybody involved with a project like that. But yeah, I was in a studio for 4 days. I had to read every Premier League team, the whole squad, twice. So yeah, and the guys, this is what people don't see. Andrew, the guy who's producing it, he's in Canada on a screen on a laptop, and he's directing me, saying, you know, like, higher, 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 you know, like, you know, welcome to Old Trafford, to the Theatre of Dreams. And then he's giving it low, low, and then so I'm giving it low key, you know. Welcome to Old Trafford, the Theatre of Dreams, the home of the greatest football club in the world. And it was all these different levels. So I had to do every team in the Premier League. This is the attention to detail. And every team in the Championship, because we're recording this in the January, and being a FIFA player comes out in September after the transfer deadline, so they know what players with what team. This is how specific it is. Then, so they had me doing all the Championship teams with all their players, and then they'll get you to do a link that says something like number 10, Jonny Pearce, number 11, Ryan on the camera. And it's that sort of, you know, because they want to cut in. So they don't want you going, which Ryan will appreciate this, they don't want you doing number 10, Jonny Pearce, because you can't get the cut, can you, Ryan? Can't get the cut. So it's all that detail. They had me doing the referees' names, they had me doing the attendances, they had me doing some of the European teams, they had me doing some of the MLS teams. You know, they were getting the money out of me for 4 days, but what an experience. And I got a credit at the end of it, you know, on the game. You know, so a wonderful experience. And I have to say, it paid quite well.
And also the exposure off the back of that, you know.
The exposure brought me to a new audience, because, you know, obviously the football audience, because I was the official announcer at the new Wembley as well. So when that reopened, after being rebuilt, I was the announcer for 2 years, you know. So, you know, I had all new experiences where I was, you know, the announcer at Wembley, I was the voice of FIFA. But this is where it was funny, because all my associates in the Premier League were all wound up, because like whether it was Liverpool, City,
every team.
I did the announcement for because they didn't expand the budget to every announcer, so that was hilarious, you know, because we have a WhatsApp group, all the announcers, and it was brilliant, you know, winding them up.
100%, and that's a game I love, and I remember that as well. And it's funny now being here with you and having met. It's funny how, you know, the way the world works. You know, we met at Crack by the Creek, and now we're recording this, and all the listeners are going to tune in. So and I suppose memorable moments, memorable games,
Yeah.
in particular with Manchester United. If you could name 3 big moments, big memories, what would they be?
Well, as you say, the moments are endless, you know, for different reasons and different occasions. I do tend to lean towards when we played Barcelona in the semi-final in 2008 to get to the Champions League final against Chelsea, because in '99 I'd been to nearly every away game in Europe, and I missed the final in Barcelona, and I always vowed that if they ever got to a final again, wherever it was in Europe, I'd go to it, and it ended up being in Russia. Now what? So that night that we beat Barcelona 1-0, it was 0-0 from the first game in Barcelona. Came over to Old Trafford, it was still 0-0. But you see, they had the away goals then as well, so I was dreading that we'd draw with them, because we'd gone out a few times on the away goals. Anyway, 15 minutes into the game, bang, Paul Scholes scores one, top right-hand corner in the East Stand. Stadium goes mad. I go mad announcing it. But after that, it's the longest 75 minutes of my life, because Messi did everything that night but score. He was twisting, turning, dinking, but he never scored. We won 1-0, and we were on our way to the Champions League final, the Helsinki Stadium in Russia. But the best bit of it was, which I didn't know, the next day I get a call, Jonny, right? And how up to date is your passport? Right. So I said, yeah, it's got years on it. You go into Russia, UEFA invite both announcers from each club to do like a 10-minute spot, and then if there's any goals scored, you announce your goal. So I got to Russia for nothing.
No way.
Yeah, and I announced Ronaldo's goal.
Class.
And then the Chelsea lad announced Frank Lampard's jammy goal, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all these little things. This podcast isn't long enough, Jonny, you know, there's so
100%.
many.
Standout moments for me that I thought about was Sir Alex's retirement.
Oh, I'll tell you what, on this podcast, you're going to have to take that clip.
One man who's been part of the tapestry of the history of this club has won 5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, 10 Charity Community Shields, 1 European Cup Winners' Cup, 1 European Super Cup, 2 Champions League titles, Intercontinental Cup, 1 FIFA Club World Cup, and 13 Premier League titles. The impossible dream made possible by the greatest British manager ever, Sir Alex Ferguson.
So, again, you're asking me for 3 standout moments. I'll introduce Fergie on his last day and his last game at Old Trafford. And their preparation, I had everything. And I had his roll of honour. Unbelievable atmosphere at Old Trafford. We played, I think it was Swansea, the last game for Fergie, and you know there's the whole emotion. We've won the league, you know, so it was great. We'd won the league, and I'm introducing him. What an honour, you know. But you know what was an extra honour? And you're talking moments that are very important in my career, in my announcing life, because when Sir Alex had his illness and he came back to Old Trafford, if you watch the documentary of him when he comes back, they show him going into the director's box, and what they'd done, and Ryan will like this, because they took the clip from 2013 where I gave him his roll of honour, you know, winner of 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, you know, the whole lot. They took that clip and dropped it into the clip where he's walking into the director's box when he came to his first game at Old Trafford. And at the launch, I hosted the documentary at Old Trafford. They had a screening outside on a massive screen. They set it up and they had everybody in the North Stand, all the guests and family and friends and everybody involved with the documentary of Sir Alex Ferguson. And I hosted that night, you know. Anyway, before I went out, my wife was with me. Before I went out, Jason Ferguson said to me, Alan, don't leave whatever you do before the end. Not that I would have done. Don't leave before the end. And there I was at the end, forever ingrained in that documentary.
Class.
So, you know, again, it's not all just about the goal or that football moment. It's about that Fergie moment and what a fantastic manager. So, you know, the Scholesy goal, Barcelona, meant I went to the Champions League final. The bonus, again, the opportunity was given to me that I ended up going to Russia. I mean, I'd have paid to go, but I was going as part of the club to do the announcements. So I had a great time in Russia.
Yeah, and meeting all these people, like footballing icons, heroes, legends of the game. You've met so many. Have you ever been starstruck, or has there been a real hero of yours that you've got to meet?
That's a great question, because, you know, when I was with the club and while he was still with the club, not that I was starstruck by him, but for me, one of my all-time favourite players is Roy Keane. You know, the Irish connection, he was the leader, and I've done, you know, a few bits with Roy in the time he was at United, and since I've done a few bits with him. And I used to say to all my friends and everybody, I said, he's the funniest guy you could meet. I know everyone's seeing it on the overlap, aren't they? I mean, he's just gold dust, and Roy's a great guy, and you know, I'd never claim to be a friend of his. I'd never say that I'm a best buddy of his, but, you know, if he walked in here now, he'd know me, you know, and, you know, different elements like that. But one of the highlights, and again, this is where another, and we keep using the word opportunity, I ended up, when Vodafone were the sponsor on the shirt of United, I ended up meeting and interviewing Michael Schumacher.
Right.
So it's not just a football icon. I ended up interviewing him on a few occasions, but one particular occasion, and he was absolutely brilliant, and he was at the top of his game at the time. And it was so sad, you know, to think he risked his life getting into a racing car, and then he ends up having an accident skiing. You know, that would be one of the highlights of actually interviewing him as well, not just meeting him, but interviewing him. He was brilliant. You know, Usain Bolt, I've met him on the pitch at Old Trafford. I've interviewed him. There's a great picture as well. I don't know if you drop any images on when you're doing the podcast, but I'll send it over to you, Ryan. When I look over there, that's Ryan, who I keep mentioning, because I've got some great images of people I've met, and there's a picture of me on the pitch at Old Trafford, you know, and it was great because he was late. You know, and normally United, he was due on the pitch at, say, 2:45 before the kickoff, after he'd broke the world record, and they had a shirt with his time on it. And normally at United, if you're late, tough, you ain't coming on the pitch, but they waited for him, you know. So, like, when I interviewed him, I dropped it in, you know, did you run here and all that? You were a bit late, you know, and it was all the cheesy gags. But Usain Bolt, brilliant. Obviously, when Ronaldo came back the second time, I'll drop you the clip for that as well.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's cool too.
It's brilliant, you know. And my Instagram double that weekend. Because,
really?
Yeah, because the club put it up.
Oh, it went viral.
Yeah. So the club put it up. So, you know, I mean, the list is endless. You know, Sir Alex Ferguson has to be at the top, but Michael Schumacher, from a non-football point of view, you know, Keano's one of my favourite players, along with Brian Robson. Those two would be my
This
favourite.
is just a personal, selfish question. Personal favourite of mine and hero of mine is David Beckham. Did you have any experience with him?
Loads of experience with Beckham. A great lad, lovely lad, very funny as well. Actually, very dry sense of humour. Yeah, I ended up. I did quite a bit with Beckham, but I did an event in Spain with him when he went to Real Madrid for PepsiCo. You know, with the Galacticos. There was Roberto Carlos and Morientes.
Was this when they were kicking the balls into the bin? No.
Not on the event I did, but it was that period. You're right. It was all that period, that time, and when he had his long hair in Spain and his ponytail and all the rest of it. But yeah, I met Bex over in Spain, and a great guy and a lovely fella. And
so obviously, you know, you're a part of the team at United. You know, you're there to encourage the crowd, get them involved in the game, get them excited for the game. And I would understand that it's such an important role. Has there ever been difficult times when maybe the team wasn't going so well, the fans were kind of getting on the team's back? You know, has there been challenging times for United?
Well, I think the expectations are so high at United, aren't they? You know, and obviously when we're not winning, and we've had a difficult run since Alex Ferguson went. So, you know, it has been a roller coaster without any shadow of a doubt. You know, I think we've come second twice, and, you know, some seasons haven't been brilliant, you know, for whatever reason. And, you know, it's not like we haven't spent the money, and ultimately I'm a United fan. You know, I want us to do well and I want us to be successful. But there have been challenges, and one of the really difficult games, and one of the lowest points for me as a United fan, as well as the stadium announcer, was that when Manchester City won their first Premier League, it was the Aguero moment, you know, in 2012. And that particular day, you might remember, but it was neck and, like, City were ahead and all they had to do in the league was win the game, you see. But on that particular day, we played Sunderland away, and we went 1-0 up, and City, at one point, we were top of the league, you see, and the Premier League had me at Sunderland as standby in case we lifted the trophy. So they had a spare trophy locked well away in about two back rooms over there. And I'm thinking, you know, City they'll absolutely batter QPR. There'll be no need for me. But they requested that I go to Sunderland, so that was fine. Anyway, I'm sat there, and all of a sudden, you know, the messages are coming through, and we're like, we're above City, you know, and this, that, and the other, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, hang on, this could be different. This might be a situation where we might win the league. Anyway, as we know, we finished the game, and City are still playing. And I've never seen Sir Alex so cool in all my life, you know, because he just remained dead calm. Because I'm at the side of the pitch and I can see all the lads. But obviously City are playing. And then the Aguero moment happened. And that was, I have to say, one of the lowest moments of my life, because you're literally seconds where you're winning the league. You're not like 5 minutes. You're not even 90 minutes. You're seconds away where you're going to win the Premier League, and we don't win it. And City win it. You know, to my dismay, the Aguero moment, Martin Tyler, that you know, I don't even say it or imitate it or,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and so I was devastated. So that's been a challenging time, because, believe it or not, the next night United had their Player of the Season awards, and I normally do the Voice of God at them. For anybody who doesn't know what the Voice of God is, you know, I'll introduce people onto the stage, you know, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host for the evening, you know, Jeff Stelling or whoever it might be. And that night, the next night, we're all hurting. Sir Alex Ferguson got on the stage and he gave one of the most inspirational speeches I've ever heard, on the back of one of the biggest losses that he probably ever encountered as a manager right across his career, you know, losing a league within seconds. His speech was like Churchillian. The room was dead silent, and he said, we will come back and we will win the league next year. I couldn't believe it. I thought, well, you know, that's a very strong statement. Not we'll win the league again, we'll win it again next year. And he picked us all up, like, I couldn't believe it, you know, and he was absolutely inspirational in that 5 minutes. So I know it's an indirect answer to the challenge, but just the whole thing. And obviously the next year we bought Robin van Persie, and the rest is history. We won our 13th Premier League title.
I know, and it's funny, like, moments like that, you need leaders, and Sir Alex is the prime example of one of the greatest leaders of all time.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And when I'm very fortunate to host a lot of events with ex-players, and you talk about Sir Alex, you know, before they tell a story, all of them open it, and this is at different events, they'll all open it with, he was the leader, without any shadow of a doubt. And I don't know if you've read his book about leadership. It's inspiring. He was number one. But you know, he had other leaders that represented him, which was great, and he was never frightened to call upon them. You know, your Steve Bruce's of this world, Keano, when it was all right, you know, was his leader. He always says his greatest captain in any interview I ever did with him was Brian Robson, and I do a lot with Robbo, and you can see why he is so respected and adored as a leader. So yeah, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Fergie was the leader, but he had the leaders within his team.
Yeah, and that leads me on to the next point. You know, team, you're working with one of the most high performing teams in the world right now. And there'll be a lot of people listening to this who work within a team, whether that's in a business, whether that's in sport or whatever it may be. You know, how important is team within your role, and how does the team make the whole announcing thing go smoothly on a game day?
Well, it's very important, Jonny, because, you know, we'll use the word team, but there's different levels of different teams, isn't there? You know, you've got the team, Manchester United, that are going to go out and play the game, but then you've got the media team who are behind me, who support me and guide me and direct me, and probably that's one of the biggest changes from, you asked me before about my early days as the announcer to now. You know, there's a big team around it, and, you know, I don't just turn up at Old Trafford and go on a microphone and say what I want. You know, it's very structured. Obviously, I've got the freedom to express myself and the way I speak and different things, but, you know, there is a structure, so there's a team around that, and I love being part of that team. I want to know what's happening, when it's happening. You know, for an example, you know, when the Queen died or when Sir Bobby Charlton died, well, you know, I don't just go on the edge of the pitch and then start announcing something. There's a team behind that, right? How are we going to do it? How are we going to express it? What we're going to write? There's a script that's got to be written properly, you know. So I'm giving you a very small example, but it's the sort of thing that when you turn up at a stadium and you hear me, or you're watching on TV and the commentator will say, now we're going to go to Old Trafford while they pay their respects or whatever, and you'll hear me. It's a daunting moment, you know, because you haven't got time for stuttering or getting your words wrong, but there's a team behind that. It's not just me. So teamwork is very important. Although I'm, if you like, doing an individual job as an announcer, there's a team behind me, supporting me, guiding me, you know, and helping me, and I couldn't do it without them. And that's one of the things that I learned from day one. It's about teamwork. It's so important. If you think you can do it on your own, you can't.
Yeah, and you're only going to perform as well as the rest of the team supporting you. And it's like sometimes people blame a manager in a certain team for the team not performing as well, but I think it's a team thing, and it's a collective that will determine.
It is a collective, you're right, you know, and you have to work together, you know, and you can see it in any industry, and I saw it, whether it was in the world of academia when I worked at the university, whether it's in the world of sport or business as a whole. You know, you only need a few weak people within an organisation and it can really drag it along for you, you know, because you're trying to make things happen, and, you know, there might be 10 of you in a team. If there's 2 of you, they're pulling the rest back instead of having you all on board, or at least saying, okay, we'll work with it. You know, not everyone has to agree all the time, but they have to agree to work on the project or pull it forward. So yeah, teamwork's been very important in all my life.
Yeah, and obviously teamwork and being a good communicator within a team is vital and essential, and your role involves communication as your day-to-day job. How can someone become a better communicator or be in a position where they might not stutter their words, or they can articulate themselves better? You know, what advice would you give to someone listening to this that wants to be able to speak on stage or put videos on social media without stuttering or worrying about what they're going to say? What advice would you give them?
You can contact me for some training, because I do presentation skills and all about how you deliver in a certain environment.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Well, that would be right up my street. That's what we'll do after, Alan, because I do public speaking in businesses, and we do talks on health and well-being, and I'm always trying to get better at it. So you're the man for the job.
Well, yeah, so it's very important, because when you're doing sort of training within a presentation environment, you know, you have to look at, first of all, who's your audience. You've got to know your audience, because, and I'll give you an example. So you've seen me work at Crack by the Creek.
Yeah.
My style of presentation at that is totally different to my style of presentation at Old Trafford. Crack by the Creek is a festival. Old Trafford, it's a football game. If I'm presenting, say I've just come back from Amsterdam and I'm presenting a conference on behalf of TeamViewer, which is a tech company, again, I've got to know my audience because it's a different level and it's a different criteria. So, you know, every event in that situation is different. So again, we go back to it, and it's simple. You have to prepare. You have to know your audience. That's number one, because if you know your audience, you're halfway there. Then you've got to know the subject matter. So if I'm doing Crap by the Creek, if I'm introducing Nathan Carter, you may have noticed this, you may not have done, but I went round to one of the guys in the band and said, can you write me all your names down and what instrument you play? Yep. So instead of just saying, Crap by the Creek, will you please welcome Nathan Carter? I would say, or maybe a lot of the other bands, because he does have actually an intro, but say for most of the bands, you know, the lead singer, whether it's Jonny Brady or Nathan Carter, or whoever it might be, it's back to teamwork. They can't do it on their own, can they? They need the guitarist, they need the drummer. So what I do is I like them to feel involved. So what I will do is I'll say, and now, Crap by the Creek, we have joining us as part of the Nathan Carter band on the drums, Ryan, you know, on lead guitar, Johnny Pierce, the greatest guitarist this side of Tyrone, you know, and all that sort of talk. But it makes it personal. And straight away, you get a smile. Yeah. You know, instead of me just saying, Crap by the Creek, will you please welcome the Nathan Carter band? So it's making it a little bit personal as well, as far as you can, you know. And it's that preparation. So if I'm doing a corporate event, I find out about the company, I find out a few facts and figures, you know, that you can just drop in instead of saying, you know, it's mundane, welcome on behalf of TeamViewer. I like to do an introduction and saying, you know, welcome on behalf of TeamViewer, one of the biggest tech companies in the world. You know, did you know that TeamViewer not only, you know, sponsor or are a partner of Manchester United, but they're also involved in Formula One. They also sponsor the Mercedes car.
And it's combining entertainment and information.
Yeah, and making it interesting at the same time, you know, because, you know, I'm sure TeamViewer wouldn't mind me saying this, or some pharmaceutical events that I host. You know, there's a term we use in the business that are a bit dry, you know, because they're high level, and that's not being insulting, you know, it's not entertainment. But I think a lot of the reason why some of these companies book me is because I bring that, where I do a piece of information, I make it light-hearted, you know, and someone will be sat there thinking, oh, right, they're in. So it's not just Man United, they're involved in Formula One. And, you know, and I always say something like, so next time you watch Formula One, have a look at the side of the Mercedes garage and you'll see TeamViewer, the name.
And it's making it personal to them. And, you know, because that's what I find whenever you're listening to some information in the form of a talk, a seminar, a webinar, whenever the speaker makes it engaging, entertaining, but as informative as well, that's whenever you stay engaged, because what you're trying to do is make sure that people are engaged, because maybe there's another speaker coming on and you're giving a little bit of background, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and it's important as well. You've got to know your environment when you're hosting an event. So for an example, are you behind a lectern? Now, some people feel very protected behind the lectern. It's like a defense mechanism. You know, are you wearing a head mic? Or, in my case, I like to hold a handheld, and I'll walk to the centre of the stage and get as near to the crowd as I can, because I don't want a barrier between us, because that's, the lectern can be a barrier. So all that psychological side of who, again, knowing your audience, knowing the room, being confident enough to have the information that you don't need the notes in front of you. If you are at the lectern, if you need the notes and you need to know a piece of information, to stay at the lectern, but then move away from it. You know, it's little things like that where there's no, you know, you're not creating a barrier.
And even for you personally, it's getting into state for you to now perform, because the Alan that we know when he's stadium announcing, you know, is potentially slightly different than the Alan off the stage, and equally, well, for you in your case, you're pretty similar. You're pretty much the same as on this and off this. This is exactly what the Alan you see here is the Alan that I spoke to off the, but then you've got people that you think about in the past that had different versions of themselves, like a stage name and then a normal. Do you think you have that, or?
Not now. Maybe years ago when I was learning the trade, you know, you sort of think, oh, people expect this, or people expect you to be like that. And, you know, like I'm not a comedian, so I never try and be a comedian, but I've got a few little one-liners, and something gives me an opportunity that I can throw something at them, I will do. But yeah, I mean, I think what you see is definitely what you get with me. Pretty straightforward, fairly direct, and it's not done me any harm this far, Jonny, so I'll stay with it.
No, it's been incredible, and I really appreciate you being here. It's been such an insightful episode, and me and Ryan both just listening to this, we've loved it, so thank you. And I suppose people listening will be interested to know what's next for you. What does the future look like over the next couple of years?
Well, listen, that's part of the adventure, isn't it? I take each day as it comes, because your health is very important. You've got to lead a healthy life. That's paramount to me, as in your fitness and the food that you eat. I am very careful with all that. I try and make sure that I eat, it's all, that's, I don't drink alcohol. I'm teetotal. Brilliant. So that's very important as well, for two reasons. One, for my health, but also, you can't be going on an event, with 10 pints in you. It just doesn't work, and I've seen it with people, where they have had 10 pints and it doesn't work. So, but your health is paramount. So, I go to the gym twice a week and stuff like that. Make sure that I try and keep as fit as I can for the age that I am and for the level that I'm at, and keep myself fresh, So, the diary next year, lots of work. I've got some brilliant work coming up. If you look on my Instagram, you'll see what I'm doing, because, I'm very lucky. I've got some great corporate work, which is great, but I've got some nice work, which, an audience with Paul Scholes coming up in the next few months, an audience with Ryan Giggs, Brian Robson, Joe Calzaghe, undefeated world champion boxer. So it's varied, that's just a few, apart from all the corporate stuff I do that, no one would know of them as such. And I also, don't just do stuff in the UK or Ireland, in fact, coming up, I've got an event for the Sligo Supporters Club. They're celebrating their anniversary, and Dennis Irwin and I are going over for that, they've got a meal, and I'll do an audience with Dennis. So it is varied, and as you know, I mentioned or alluded to it there before, I recently was in Amsterdam in Holland hosting an event for team viewers. So life's good, Jonny.
Yeah, and you had Jaap Stam over a few weeks ago.
That was amazing because, Jaap and I know each other, and I've done podcasts with Jaap and different things, and interviewed him on many occasions, and recently I interviewed him at Wembley. But he was in Malta. My wife and I were in Malta celebrating with the Malta supporters, and Jaap Stam was there playing in a Legends game against the Malta Vets, and his wife was there. So, we were with Jaap and his wife, my wife and I, quite a bit, early on, because we were there before a lot of the others came. So we spent a lot of time together. And if you've ever been to Malta, there's an island called Goal Zone. We went over to Goal Zone, did a trip. Anyway, he just was talking and said, I'm playing 2 charity games at the end of July in Ireland. He said, I'm doing one in Belfast and one in Dublin. But he said, we're not going back to Holland, he said, where he lives. He said, I'm going to spend a week in Ireland. I said, where are you? He said, well, I'm up in the north. He said, I'm actually in Donegal for a lot of it. Yeah. So I said, well, why don't you come to the west of Ireland, one of the most beautifulest places in Ireland, and come and visit us, because, I've obviously got a holiday home here. But I said, come and see us. Anyway, he did. Him and Ellis came and spent a wonderful day, and I took them to Downpatrick and the beach at where we are here, where our holiday home is in the west of Ireland, and he loved his time here. But he put a picture on his Instagram of me and him at this
I've seen it.
Downpatrick it's called, beautiful part of the west of Ireland. Anyway, the Western People, the newspaper, picked it up and dropped it into their news feed. So yeah, we had Jaap Stam in the west of Ireland, and he said he's coming again. So I'll have to get in touch with Tourism Ireland, and maybe he can do a campaign for them.
Absolutely, epic. And Alan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us into your holiday home here in Sligo, and I really enjoyed hearing from you. And if you're listening to this podcast, be sure to check out more on Alan's website. Yeah,
alankeegan.com, or my Instagram, and you'll see what I'm doing and what I'm up to.
Yeah, absolutely epic. Thanks for listening, guys. And if you like it, make sure to share it with your friends, and I'll chat to you in the next episode.